Man is what he believes. Anton Chekhov, in his wonderful book, Anatomy of an Illness, Norman Cousins tells an instructive story about Pablo Casals, one of the great musicians of the 20th century. It's a story of belief and renewal, and we can all learn from it. Cousins describes meeting Casals shortly before the great cellist's 90th birthday. Cousins says that it was almost painful to watch the old man as he began his day. His frailty and arthritis were so debilitating that he needed help in dressing. His emphysema was evident in his labored breathing. He walked with a shuffle, stooped over, his head pitched forward. His hands were swollen, his fingers clenched. He looked like a very old, very tired man. Even before eating, he made his way to the piano, one of several instruments on which Casals had become proficient. With great difficulty, he arranged himself on the piano bench. It seemed a terrible effort for him to bring his clenched, swollen fingers to the keyboard. And then something quite miraculous happened. Casals suddenly and completely transformed himself before Cousins's eyes. He went into a resourceful state, and as he did, his physiology changed to such a degree that he began to move and play, producing both in his body and on the piano results that should have been possible only for a healthy, strong, flexible pianist. As Cousins put it, the fingers slowly unlocked and reached toward the keys like the buds of a plant toward the sunlight. His back straightened. He seemed to breathe more freely. The very thought of playing the piano totally changed his state and thus the effectiveness of his body. Casals began with Bach's Wohltemperiert Klavier, playing with great sensitivity and control. He then launched into a Brahms concerto, and his fingers seemed to race above the keyboard. His entire body seemed fused with the music, Cousins wrote. It was no longer stiff and shrunken but supple and graceful and completely freed of its arthritic coils. By the time he walked away from the piano, he seemed entirely different from the person who had sat down to play. He stood straighter and taller, he walked without a trace of a shuffle. He immediately walked to the breakfast table, ate heartily, and then went out for a stroll along the beach. We usually think of beliefs in terms of creeds or doctrines, and that's what many beliefs are. But in the most basic sense, a belief is any guiding principle, dictum, faith, or passion that can provide meaning and direction in life. Unlimited stimuli are available to us. Beliefs are the prearranged, organized filters to our perceptions of the world. Beliefs are like commanders of the brain. When we congruently believe something is true, it is like delivering a command to our brain as to how to represent what is occurring. Casals believed in music and in art. That's what had given beauty and order and nobility to his life, and that's what could still provide daily miracles for him. Because he believed in the transcendent power of his art, he was empowered in a way that almost defies understanding. His beliefs transformed him daily from a tired old man to a vital genius. In the most profound sense, they kept him alive. John Stuart Mill once wrote, "One person with a belief is equal to a force of 99 who have only interests." That's precisely why beliefs open the door to excellence. Belief delivers a direct command to your nervous system. When you believe something is true, you literally go into the state of its being true. Handled effectively, beliefs can be the most powerful forces for creating good in your life. On the other hand, beliefs that limit your actions and thoughts can be as devastating as resourceful beliefs can be empowering. Religions throughout history have empowered millions of people and given them strength to do things they thought they couldn't. Beliefs help us tap the richest resources deep within us, creating and directing these resources in the support of our desired outcomes. Beliefs are the compass and maps that guide us toward our goals and give us the surety to know we'll get there. Without beliefs or the ability to tap into them, people can be totally disempowered. They're like a motorboat without a motor or rudder. With powerful guiding beliefs, you have the power to take action and create the world you want to live in. Beliefs help you see what you want and energize you to get it. In fact, there's no more powerful directing force in human behavior than belief. In essence, human history is the history of human belief. The people who have changed history, whether Christ, Muhammad, Copernicus, Columbus, Edison, or Einstein, have been the people who have changed our beliefs. To change our own behaviors, we have to start with our own beliefs. If we want to model excellence, we need to learn to model the beliefs of those who achieve excellence. The more we learn about human behavior, the more we learn about the extraordinary power that beliefs have over our lives. In many ways, that power defies the logical models most of us have. But it's clear that even at the level of physiology, beliefs' congruent internal representations control reality. A remarkable study was done on schizophrenia not long ago. One case involved a woman with a split personality. Normally, her blood sugar levels were completely normal. But when she believed she was a diabetic, her whole physiology changed to become that of a diabetic. Her belief had become her reality. In a similar vein, there have been numerous studies in which a person in a hypnotic trance is touched with a piece of ice represented to him as a piece of hot metal. Invariably, a blister will develop at the point of contact. What counted was not reality but belief, the direct unquestioned communication to the nervous system. The brain simply does what it's told. Most of us are aware of the placebo effect. People who are told a drug will have a certain effect will many times experience that effect even when given an empty pill with no active properties. Norman Cousins, who learned firsthand the power of belief in eliminating his own illness, concludes, drugs are not always necessary. Belief in recovery always is. One remarkable placebo study concerned a group of patients with bleeding ulcers. They were divided into two groups. People in the first were told they were being given a new drug that would absolutely produce relief. Those in the second were told they were being given an experimental drug, but that very little was known about its effects. 70% of those in the first group experienced significant relief from their ulcers. Only 25% of the second group had a similar result. In both cases, patients received a drug with no medicinal properties at all. The only difference was the belief system they adopted. Even more remarkable are the numerous studies of people who, given drugs known to have harmful effects, have experienced no ill effects at all when told they would experience a positive outcome. Studies conducted by Dr. Andrew Weil have shown that the experiences of drug users correspond almost exactly to their expectations. He found he could lead a person given a dose of an amphetamine to feel sedated or a person given a barbiturate to feel stimulated. The magic of drugs resides within the mind of the user, not in the drugs, Weil concluded. In all these instances, the one constant that most powerfully affected the results was belief, the consistent, congruent messages delivered to the brain and nervous system. For all its power, there is no abstruse magic involved in the process. Belief is nothing but a state, an internal representation that governs behavior. It can be an empowering belief in possibility, a belief that we will succeed in something or achieve something else. It can be a disempowering belief, a belief that we can't succeed, that our limitations are clear, untractable, and overwhelming. If you believe in success, you'll be empowered to achieve it. If you believe in failure, those messages will tend to lead you to experience that as well. Remember, whether you say you can do something or you say you can't, you're right. Both kinds of beliefs have great power. The question is what kinds of beliefs are best to have, and how do we develop them? The birth of excellence begins with our awareness that our beliefs are a choice. We usually don't think of it that way, but belief can be a conscious choice. You can choose beliefs that limit you, or you can choose beliefs that support you. The trick is to choose the beliefs that are conducive to success and the results you want and to discard the ones that hold you back. The biggest misconception people often have of belief is that it's a static, intellectual concept, an understanding that's divorced from action and results. Nothing could be further from the truth. Belief is the doorway to excellence precisely because there's nothing divorced or static about it. It is our belief that determines how much of our potential we'll be able to tap. Beliefs can turn on or shut off the flow of ideas. Imagine the following situation. Someone says to you, "Please get me the salt," and as you walk into the next room, you say, "But I don't know where it is." After looking for a few minutes, you call out, "I can't find the salt." Then that someone walks up, takes the salt right off the shelf in front of you, and says, "Look, dummy, it's right here in front of you." If it was a snake, it would have bitten you. When you said, "I can't," you gave your brain a command not to see the salt. In psychology, we call it a scotoma. Remember, every human experience, everything you've ever said, seen, heard, felt, smelled, or tasted is stored in your brain. When you congruently say you cannot remember, you're right. When you congruently say you can, you give a command to your nervous system that opens up the pathways to the part of your brain that can potentially deliver the answers you need. They can because they think they can. Virgil. So again, what are beliefs? They are preformed, pre-organized approaches to perception that filter our communication to ourselves in a consistent manner. Where do beliefs come from? Why do some people have beliefs that push them towards success while others have beliefs that only help them to fail? If we are going to try to model the beliefs that foster excellence, the first thing we need to find out is where those beliefs come from. The first source is the environment. This is where the cycles of success breeding success and failure breeding failure are played out in the most relentless fashion. The real horror of ghetto life is not the daily frustrations and deprivations. People can overcome those. The real nightmare is the effect the environment has on beliefs and dreams. If all you see is failure, if all you see is despair, it's very hard for you to form the internal representations that will foster success. Remember, in the last chapter we said modeling is something we all do consistently. If you grow up in wealth and success, you can easily model wealth and success. If you grow up in poverty and despair, that's where your models of possibility come from. Albert Einstein said, "Few people are capable of expressing with equanimity opinions which differ from the prejudices of their social environment. Most people are even incapable of forming such opinions." In one of my advanced courses in modeling, I do an exercise where we find people who live in the streets of big cities. We bring them in and model their belief systems and mental strategies. We offer them food and a great deal of love and simply ask if they would tell the group about their life, how they feel about where they are now, and why they believe things are that way. Then we contrast them with people who, in spite of great physical or emotional tragedies, have turned their lives around. In a recent session, we had one man who was 28 years old, strong, obviously intelligent, and physically fit, with a handsome face. Why was he so unhappy and living in the street while W. Mitchell, who, at least on the surface, had fewer resources available to change his life, was so happy? Mitchell grew up in an environment that provided examples, models of people who had overcome great odds to produce a life of joy. This created a belief in himself: this was possible for me as well. By contrast, this other young man, call him John, grew up in an environment where no such models existed. His mother was a prostitute, his father went to jail for shooting someone. When he was 8 years old, his father shot him up with heroin. That kind of environment certainly played a role in what he believed was possible, little more than survival, and how to achieve it: live in the streets, steal, attempt to erase your pain through drugs. He believed that people always take advantage of you if you don't watch them, that no one loves anyone, and so on. That night we worked with this man and changed his belief systems, as will be explained in chapter 6. As a result, he never went back to the streets. Since that night, he has been off drugs. He began working, and he now has newfound friends and is living in a new environment with new beliefs, producing new results. Dr. Benjamin Bloom of the University of Chicago studied 100 extraordinarily successful young athletes, musicians, and students. He was surprised to find that most of the young prodigies didn't begin by showing great flashes of brilliance. Instead, most received careful attention, guidance, and support, and then they began to develop. The belief that they could be special came before any overt signs of great talent. Environment may be the single most potent generator of belief, but it's not the only one. If it were, we'd live in a static world where the children of wealth would know only wealth, and the children of poverty would never rise above their origins. Instead, there are other experiences and ways of learning that can also be incubators of belief. Events, small or large, can help foster beliefs. There are certain events in everyone's life that they will never forget. Where were you the day John F. Kennedy was killed? If you are old enough to remember it, I'm sure you know. For many people, it was a day that forever altered their worldview. In the same way, most of us have experiences we'll never forget, instances that had such an impact on us that they were installed into our brains forever. These are the kinds of experiences that form the beliefs that can change our lives. When I was 13, I was looking at what I wanted to do with my life, and I decided that I would become a sports writer caster. One day I read in the newspaper that Howard Cosell would be autographing his new book at a local department store. I thought, if I'm going to become a sportscaster, I need to start interviewing professionals. Why not start at the top? I got out of school, borrowed a tape recorder, and my mother drove me to the department store. When I arrived, Mr. Cosell was getting up to leave. I began to panic. He was also surrounded by reporters all fighting for his last comments. Somehow I ducked under several reporters' arms and approached Mr. Cosell. Speaking at lightning speed, I told him what I was doing and asked for a brief taped interview. With dozens of reporters waiting, Howard Cosell gave me a personal interview. That experience changed my belief about what was possible, who in life was approachable, and what the rewards were for asking for what I wanted. Because of Mr. Cossel's encouragement, I went on to write for a daily newspaper and developed a career in the communications field. A third way to foster belief is through knowledge. A direct experience is one form of knowledge. Another is gained through reading, seeing movies, viewing the world as it is portrayed by others. Knowledge is one of the great ways to break the shackles of a limiting environment. No matter how grim your world is, if you can read about the accomplishments of others, you can create the beliefs that will allow you to succeed. Dr. Robert Kirwan, a black political scientist, wrote in the New York Times how the example of Jackie Robinson, the first black player in the major leagues, changed his life when he was a youngster. I was enriched by my attachment to him. The level of my expectations was raised by his example. A fourth way that results are created is through our past results. The surest way to create a belief that you can do something is to do it once, just once. If you succeed once, it's far easier to form the belief that you'll succeed again. I had to write the first draft of this book in less than a month in order to make the deadline. I wasn't sure if I could do it. But when I had to do a chapter in a single day, I found I could do it. And once I had succeeded with one, I knew I could do it again. I was able to form the belief that allowed me to finish this book on time. Journalists learn the same thing about writing on deadline. There are few things in life as daunting as having to knock out a full story in an hour or less under daily deadline pressure. Most beginning journalists dread it more than any part of their job. But what they find is that if they succeed once or twice, they know they'll succeed in the future. They don't get smarter or quicker as they get older, but once empowered with the belief that they can knock out a story in whatever time is available, they find they can always do it. The same is true for comedians, businessmen, or people in just about any other walk of life. Believing it can be done becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The fifth way to establish beliefs is through the creating in your mind of the experience you desire in the future as if it were here now. Just as past experiences can change your internal representations and thus what you believe is possible, so can your imagined experience of how you want things to be in the future. I call this experiencing results in advance. When the results you have around you are not supporting you in being in a powerful and effective state, you can simply create the world the way you want it to be and step into that experience, thereby changing your states, your beliefs, and your actions. After all, if you're a salesman, is it easier to make $10,000 or $100,000? The truth is it's easier to make $100,000. Let me tell you why. If your goal is to make $10,000, what you're really trying to do is make enough to pay the bills. If that's what your goal is, if that's what you represent to yourself about why you're working so hard, do you think that you will be in an excited, empowered, resourceful state as you work? Are you seething with excitement, thinking, boy, oh boy, I've got to get to work so I can make enough to pay my lousy bills? I don't know about you, but that doesn't get my motor running. But selling is selling. You have to make the same calls, meet the same people, deliver the same products, no matter what you're hoping to achieve. So it's a lot more exciting, a lot more enticing, to go out with the goal of making $100,000 than $10,000. And that state of excitement is much more likely to activate your taking the kinds of consistent actions that will tap your higher potential than just hoping to go out and make a living. Obviously, money is not the only way to motivate yourself. Whatever your goal may be, if you create in your mind a clear image of the result you want and represent it to yourself as if you've already achieved it, then you will go into the kind of states that will support you in creating the results you desire. One of the premises we hold is that every statement you make is dated and is relative to the time that it's made. It's not a statement of universal truth. It's true only for a certain person at a certain time. It's subject to change. If you have negative belief systems, you should know by now what sort of harmful effects they have. But it's essential to realize that belief systems are no more immutable than the length of your hair, your affection for a particular kind of music, the quality of your relationship with a particular person. If you're driving a Honda and decide you would be happier with a Chrysler or Cadillac or Mercedes, it's in your power to change. Your internal representations and beliefs work in much the same way. If you don't like them, you can change them. We all have a hierarchy, a ladder of beliefs. We have core beliefs, things that are so fundamental we would die for them. Those are things like our ideas about patriotism and family and love. But most of our lives are governed by beliefs about possibility or success or happiness that we've picked up unconsciously over the years. The key is to take those beliefs and make sure that they work for you, that they're effective and empowering. We've talked about the importance of modeling. Modeling excellence begins with modeling belief. Some things take time to model, but if you can read and think and hear, you can model the beliefs of the most successful people on the planet. When J. Paul Getty started in life, he made up his mind to find out about the beliefs of the most successful people, and then he went out and modeled them. You can consciously model his beliefs and those of most great leaders by reading their autobiographies. Our libraries are teeming with ancestor questions about how to produce practically any result you want. Where do your personal beliefs come from? Do they come from the average man on the street? Do they come from TV and radio? Do they come from whoever talks the longest and the loudest? If you want to succeed, it would be wise for you to choose your beliefs carefully, rather than walking around like a piece of flypaper, picking up whichever belief sticks. An important thing to realize is that the potentials we tap, the results we get, are all part of a dynamic process that begins with belief. I like to think of the process in terms of the following diagram. Let's say a person has a belief that he's ineffective at something. Let's say he's told himself that he's a bad student. If he has expectations of failure, how much of his potential is he going to tap? Not very much. He's already told himself that he doesn't know. He's already signaled his brain to expect failure. Having begun with those sorts of expectations, what sorts of actions will he probably take? Will they be confident, energized, congruent, and assertive? Will they reflect his real potential? Not likely. If you're convinced you're going to fail, why make the effort to try hard? So you've started with a belief system that stresses what you can't do, a system that subsequently signals your nervous system to respond in a certain way. You've tapped a limited amount of your potential. You've taken half-hearted, tentative actions. What sort of results come out of all this? Chances are they'll be pretty dismal. What will these dismal results do to your beliefs about subsequent endeavors? Chances are they'll reinforce the negative beliefs that started the whole chain. If this is a formula for success, the LA Raiders are a bunch of ballerinas. What we have here is a classic downward spiral. Failure breeds failure. People who are unhappy and who live broken lives have often been without the results they desire for so long that they no longer believe they can produce the results that they want. They do little or nothing to tap their potential and begin to try to find out how they can get their life to where they're doing as little as possible. From such actions, what results do they achieve? Of course, they are miserable results that break down their beliefs even more. If that's possible, let's look at this from another direction. Let's say you begin with great expectations. More than expectations, you believe with every fiber of your being that you will succeed. Starting with that direct, clear communication of what you know to be true, how much of your potential will you use? Probably a good deal. What kind of actions are you going to take this time? Are you going to drag yourself out and take a half-hearted shot at it? Of course not. You're excited, you're energized, you have great expectations of success, you're going to go great guns. If you put out that sort of effort, what sort of results will be generated? Chances are they'll be pretty good. And what does that do to your belief in your ability to produce great results in the future? It's the opposite of the vicious cycle. In this case, success feeds on success and generates more success, and each success creates more belief and momentum to succeed on an even higher scale. Do resourceful people screw up? Sure they do. Do affirmative beliefs guarantee results every time? Of course not. If anyone tells you he's got a magic formula to guarantee perpetual, flawless success, you'd best grab your wallet and start walking in the opposite direction. But history has shown time and again that if people maintain the belief systems that empower them, they'll keep coming back with enough action and enough resourcefulness to succeed eventually. Abraham Lincoln lost some important elections, but he continued to believe in his ability to succeed in the long term. He allowed himself to be empowered by success, and he refused to be cowed by his failures. His belief system was geared toward excellence, and he finally achieved it. When he did, he changed the history of this country. Sometimes it's not necessary to have a tremendous belief or attitude about something in order to succeed. Sometimes people produce outstanding results simply because they don't know something is difficult or impossible. Sometimes just not having a limiting belief is enough. For example, there is a story of a young man who fell asleep during math class. He woke up as the bell rang, looked up at the blackboard, and copied the 2 problems that were there. He assumed they were the homework for the night. He went home and labored all day and all night. He couldn't figure out either one, but he kept trying for the rest of the week. Finally, he got the answer to one and brought it to class. The teacher was absolutely stunned. It turned out the problem he'd solved was supposedly unsolvable. If the student had known that, he probably wouldn't have solved it. But since he didn't tell himself it couldn't be done, in fact, quite the opposite. He thought he had to solve it, and he was able to find a way to do it. Another way to change your belief is to have an experience that disproves it. That's another reason why we do the fire walk. I don't care if people can walk on fire, but I do care that people can do something they thought was impossible. If you can do one thing you thought was utterly impossible, it causes you to rethink your beliefs. Life is both subtler and more complex than some of us like to believe. So if you haven't done so already, review your beliefs and decide which ones you might change now and what you would change those beliefs to. The next question is the figure below concave or convex? It's a silly question. The answer is, it depends on how you're looking at it. Your reality is the reality you create. If you have positive internal representations or beliefs, it's because that's what you have created. If you have negative ones, you've created them too. There are any number of beliefs that foster excellence, but I've picked up 7 that strike me as particularly important. I call them